Welcome to Novelist Spotlight. This is Mike Consul, your host. In addition to being the host of this podcast and interviewing novelists, I am a novelist myself. I have 3 published novels. My latest is titled Lolita Firestone, a supernatural novel, and it is set in Sedona, Arizona and Cairo, Egypt. My previous novel is titled Family Recipes, a novel about Italian culture, Catholic guilt, and the culinary crime of the century. And my first novel is named Hardwood, a novel about college basketball and other games young men play. And that story deals with issues ranging from depression and racism to sex, religion, and university politics. All 3 novels are listed in the episode notes. I hope you will buy them, I hope you will read them, and I hope you will thoroughly enjoy them. Now, on with our program.
In the spotlight is Amy Young. After spending a decade in Los Angeles working in the entertainment industry and writing her debut novel, she decided it was time to return to her hometown, Cleveland, Ohio. She's working on her second novel right now. It's a thriller. She also teaches at the Lakewood Young Filmmakers Academy. She earned her bachelor's degree in English at Kenyon College. And her debut novel, The Water Tower, was slated for release on June 20. We're past that mark. Has it been released? First of all, Amy, welcome to the program. And has The Water Tower been released?
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And yes, it did come out on June 20th as planned. So we're rolling.
How are you feeling about it?
I feel really good. I've got some, stuff coming up. I've got virtual tours. I've got a book signing. So everything is going well. I mean, I have no real frame of reference because this is my debut, but seems to be going well so far.
Now, you studied English, as I said, at Kenyon College. When you studied English, with what in mind? Did you have a specific career or goal in mind? Were you going to write novels, or were you learning English for a different purpose?
I didn't have a specific goal in mind. I was very scattered when I was in college, and I chose English because Kenyon has a fantastic English program, first of all, but I've always been a big reader. And so picking a major that was a lot of just reading books really appealed to me.
Talk about how you got involved in the acting business. Why acting? What got you going with that?
So I started acting when I was very young. My parents enrolled me in classes at a local theater, and so I took classes, and then I did some plays in high school. And after I graduated from college, I didn't do any traditional theater in college. I danced though, so I participated in the modern dance shows that went on at Kenyon. And then after I graduated, I started taking another acting class because I missed it and I wanted it back in my life. And I just started getting cast in shows, and I kept taking classes, and it all eventually led me to moving out to Los Angeles and working there for a while. And then
were you in Cleveland then? You were in Cleveland while you were getting I'm trying to think of what do they call the person who selects the actors? It's not to the director, but the
casting director.
Casting director, yeah. Were you being selected by a casting director in Cleveland to be in shows that were being filmed in LA?
No, I didn't start acting. I mean, I did some commercial work in Cleveland with agents here, but I didn't start working on TV shows until I had moved out to Los Angeles and was being seen by casting directors there. I think that the industry is a lot different now because of the way that COVID changed everything. But back when I moved to LA in 2013, like you had to be there or they wouldn't consider bringing you on.
What kind of acting did you do? Were you a comedic actress, or were you doing, was there any specialty, or were you taking roles that were available that obviously the casting director thought was in your wheelhouse?
I did a lot of theater to start off. So they were theater shows, dramatic shows, comedic shows. My first, the show where I met my husband was Noel Coward's Hay Fever, which was a fun British farce. And so I did a lot of theater work in Cleveland. I continued doing theater work in Los Angeles. And the shows that I appeared on when I was working in the entertainment industry, I think they were all comedies. I don't think I did any dramas.
Now, you met your husband. How did you know he was your husband? I mean, and just in terms of what attracted you to him, or him to you, if he stated that to you?
It's so funny because when we first met doing the show, he was more experienced in the theater world than I was, and he had majored in theater in college, and he kind of like waltzed in and out of the auditions because he had been invited by the director, and I was like, who is this guy? Like, who does this guy think he is? And then we were paired as a couple in the show, and we just started kind of hanging out together, and I don't know, it just evolved from there. But I do remember telling a friend of mine all those years ago, because that was back in 2004, I think I met my husband. So I guess I did.
How long was that? Right after you met him, you told somebody, I think I met my husband?
It was close. I think that I had a feeling that he was the one.
But he was haughty. You don't tell him that, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. But he was haughty, is what you're saying. He was a little high-handed, and who's this guy? So you obviously got past that very quickly. Did you mistake? I mean, I've known people who I thought were standoffish until I met them, and then I realized they're just shy. Did your future husband act in a way? Did you misinterpret his behavior as arrogant or high-handed, only to find out it was something else?
Absolutely. I completely misinterpreted it. I mean, he came in and out of the audition because he was like in rehearsals for something else. He had to just like drop in and then go. That was all, at the director's behest. And I think that I just projected something onto him that, wasn't really there. He's the nicest man that you'll ever meet. He can talk anyone's ear off about anything. He's just very sweet. So I think that any negative connotations were mine.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said you missed acting and decided to get back involved. What is it that you missed about acting? What does acting do to feed your psyche?
I really like being able to kind of put on someone else's skin for a little while and just take on whatever persona that is. I enjoy the research that goes into roles. I enjoy developing the character, especially when they're different from me. And I just really like being on stage. I like being able to evoke emotions in people that, come to see the shows. And I think that translates to writing as well.
Now, I was going to ask the same things that appeal to you about acting. It sounds like writing, fiction writing also feeds. I mean, you can be whoever you want to be when you're fiction writing. In fact, you're going to be multiple characters. So do you feel that they're similar in that way? And is that part of the appeal of writing?
I do. And I think that a lot of actors, end up writing at some point in their careers, whether it's like a screenplay or they're writing sketch or a book. I think that they're very close, even though they don't necessarily appear that way at first glance.
Now, do you feel that because you're in the entertainment industry, you've been in the entertainment industry, you're still in the entertainment industry, does that make you more focused on the imagery that appears in your writing?
I think that I probably think more in terms of the way that a scene would appear cinematically than perhaps someone who wasn't as into film and TV as as I am. I don't know necessarily that I'm like any better at it than I would be if I wasn't, but I do think that there are certain emotions that I attach to different scenes, and I think about them in terms of like watching it on a screen.
Now, do you write with cinematic intent? Do you write thinking, I'd like to see this on the silver screen?
No, I mean, when I wrote The Water Tower, I was not thinking that way. And the book I'm currently working on, it didn't really cross my mind. I write mostly dialogue first, and then I go back and fill in the scenery, so that I guess I kind of focus on one thing at a time as I'm writing each draft.
So it sounds like your books are probably fairly dialogue heavy.
Yes, they are.
Okay. Now, talk about The Water Tower. That's the novel that's just been released. You're working on the second one, which is a thriller. The Water Tower. Tell our listeners just basically the essentials they need to know about The Water Tower that might just draw them in, and without giving anything away.
Sure. So The Water Tower the first chapter starts with a death. There's a girl, she's up on the water tower, which, aptly named, and she dies. And it's unclear how she dies, why she dies. And my protagonist is named Josie Ashbury, and she has returned to her Ohio hometown after being in Los Angeles. She was an actress. She was extremely successful, more successful than I ever was. And she had a breakdown. So she returns to her hometown and ends up with a position teaching a couple of acting classes at the high school. She was, kind of drafted into it by an old teacher. And the girl was one of her students. And so she decides that she needs to know what happened to this girl. And there are other things that occur that kind of make it so that she really needs to be the one that's going to solve the case. I guess I think that's all I can say without giving too much away.
Now, you decided to start writing. Why? You do stand-up comedy, which I want to talk to you about in a little bit, which
Sure.
is immediate instant gratification, having a live audience and they hopefully laughing,
Yeah.
belly laughter. And if you do any stage acting, there's immediate gratification. Or for that matter, acting, even if it's for a show and they're filming, you're with a team of people. Novel writing is solitary. You're in a room. Presumably you're in a room or a coffee house by yourself, steeped in your own thoughts and trying to bring to life scenes, characters, dialogue, and so on. So back to the original question, which is, why did you make the decision that you wanted to start doing fiction writing?
I think the decision came from meeting another novelist. I had a friend in Los Angeles. She was also an actress. We met doing a play, and she was a romance novelist. And she had all these books available on Amazon, and she was also a comedy writer. I mean, she was so well-rounded, and I thought, wow, that must be really interesting to have all of those aspects of art, of like going on in your life. And I thought, I wonder if I could do that. But I knew I didn't want to write romance because that's not my genre. But I would refer to myself as an extroverted introvert. So I like being by myself. I'm comfortable by myself. So the writing aspect of it kind of came naturally to me because I work best alone. So I just started writing the book, and the rest of it just kind of came to me as I went.
Now, talk about that first novel. How long did you find it to be a struggle? How long did it take you? Most people, when they start fiction writing, are really surprised by how difficult it is.
It is so difficult. I mean, my nephew is 15 and he keeps asking me, how do you write a book? I have all these ideas. I can't get them down on the page. And I said, that's the trick. You have to be able to get it down on the page. And I walked away from the book many times. I started, I think it was 2014 or 2015 when I started it, and I would start and stop and, do other things and work on other stuff and then pick it up again and put it back down. And then I finally finished a draft in 2019, I think. And the pandemic was really what drove me to finish it once and for all. I found myself unemployed. I had a lot of time on my hands, and I thought, I am going to turn the lemons of this into lemonade, and I am going to put all my effort into getting a finished draft of this book done. And I did. I pushed myself as much as I could to do that. But yeah, it's not easy. I think once you do it once, then it gets a little easier. But starting off, I mean, if it comes easily to someone, then kudos to them, because I had to force myself to finish.
Yeah, very rare that somebody that it comes easily to anybody. I would certainly think somebody might be lying if they said that. So one of the keys to most successful writing is having a real work ethic, having a system, having a work ethic. What was your regimen, your writing regimen? Were you a morning writer? Did you put in X number of hours? Did you have a word count? Tell us about that.
I had a word count when I dove back into it in 2020. I did so much research. I pulled an Excel spreadsheet from this website called the Story Grid, and they really break down different novels that are already in existence for you to show you how scenes should turn and where things should be. And they also had a spreadsheet for word counts where you can track it on a graph. So I wanted to hit, I think it was 3,000 words a day when I was revising.
That's a lot.
And it's a lot. And I did the same thing for the thriller that I'm working on now with the first draft, but it was 5,000 words a day. And I wrote the first draft in a month because I was like, I can't take another 7 years to write a book. It's not going to work.
So the first one, The Water Tower, took 7 years, but that was with stops and starts.
Yeah, it was, putting it aside for months at a time and then coming back to it. The thriller I'm working on now, I was determined to get it done. So I made myself do a certain amount of words every day until the book was finished.
And was that also 3,000?
It was 5,000.
5,000. Okay. Because you were doing a first draft and
Yes.
presumably a rough first draft when
Yes.
you're cranking out that many words, and then you start to polish from there, rewrite, distill, whatever. What was the name of that book? Was it a book that you were talking about that gave you kind of the model for writing it and were showing transitions in novels and such?
It's a website called Story Grid, and I believe they have a podcast that's still going, where the creator and an author talk about the process. The creator works with this author, and they walk through step by step the author writing a book. So he's writing it as they're editing it. It was very interesting to listen to, but the website has all kinds of resources on the conventions of different types of writing, whether it's thriller, mystery, romance, fantasy. I found it extremely useful. And like I said, that spreadsheet really helped me to see exactly where scenes needed to go, if I needed to reorder it. And I know there are a lot of different writing softwares out there, but this just worked. This process worked very well for me.
What is your deadline on your next book?
So I am working with an editor before I give this one to my agent. It had some technical issues that I was running into a wall and I couldn't figure it out on my own. So I have a draft due to her on August 9th. So I'm in the thick of edits.
So you're expecting to have this novel completed and ready for publication in what time frame? Hopefully. Your first one took 7 years. Again, stops and starts. The second one will be completed in how long?
The second one, I hope to be finished by the fall. So I hope to have this one over to my agent by, I will say optimistically, October, if I can get all the changes done that the editor says need to be done on this next round. And I started it last March was when I did my own NaNoWriMo. So I wrote it in 1 month. But I have to caveat that with my dog got very ill and passed away in May. She passed in August. She was diagnosed with cancer in May. So I was not working during that time because I was we were going through chemo and trying to help her, and it was kind of a traumatic time. So there was a block of time in there that I did set it aside because I was dealing with other things. Yeah,
understandable. So it sounds like about 18 months is what you're looking at. It was last March through this August is when you expect to have a completed manuscript?
Yes.
Okay. So getting back to your actual writing style, just the methodology you use, do you do anything ritualistic? Do you meditate before starting? Do you hit the treadmill? Do you do anything that primes you for writing? You listen to some death metal?
When I was writing The Water Tower, I listened to music by Gustavo Santaolalla, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm probably not, but
what type of music is that?
Is
it mood music or ambient
it's mood music. He did the oh my gosh. He did the music for Making a Murderer, and he did the music for, is it The End of Us? The show on HBO.
Oh,
it's based on
This
the video
Is
game.
Us. Isn't it This Is Us, or is it
No,
the end?
It's the end. It's the one with Pedro Pascal.
So this is a guy who does scores for movies and shows?
Yes.
Soundtracks.
And it's kind of haunting and beautiful. And there was something about it that really translated for me into like the moody scenery of the book.
Yeah.
I am a big fan of meditation. If I feel like I am stuck or I don't feel particularly creative, I will find usually a meditation podcast that's, specifically for creativity, and I'll listen to that and then see if I can get myself going.
Gotcha. So you've got this book in the works. I often ask novelists, what's the strongest part of your writing game? I suspect for you is dialogue. You base, the whole creation of that first draft is really built around dialogue, it sounds like. Do you feel that that's your greatest strength? If somebody's going to read you and say, wow, this aspect of the novel really impressed me, would it be the dialogue, or would it be characterization or pacing, or what would it be?
I think it's the dialogue, and I'm just basing that on what I've been told by people who have read my work. Dialogue, I think, is my strong suit, which is funny to me because I had trouble writing it at first. I couldn't hear the voices of the different people. I couldn't hear like each distinct voice. And now that I've practiced as much as I have, I can hear it. So I think the dialogue probably comes naturally to me because of the acting training. But yeah, I think that's my strongest skill as a writer.
Do you create characters who are based on real people, just so that you got that level of familiarity and intimacy with the character, or are they completely fabricated or composite?
It's a little bit of both. Some of them are loosely based, whether it's physical characteristics or personality traits, on people that I know, and some of them are more things that I've just kind of pulled out of memory or having seen something that inspired me to create the character the way that I did.
Now you're cranking out 5,000 words at a clip when you're doing that first draft. How much time per day does it average out to?
I think that 5,000 words a day during that first draft translated to anywhere from 2 to 5 hours.
2 to 5 hours. Yeah, that's quite a spread of time, but you are dealing with a lot of words.
Yeah, it just depended on how much time I had that day and how easily the writing was coming to me. You know, there are some days when you just sit down and you're like, the last thing you want to do is write. And it's hard to get going on those days. But I think that between 2 and 5 is a fair assessment.
Now, let me ask you, do you have those days where you really don't feel like writing and you just say, look, I'm going to waste my time if I sit down and try to do this, and I'm just going to depress myself, or I'm going to punch holes in my self-esteem, so I'm just not going to write today? Or do you just decide that I'm going to write because my brain's always going to tell me that you don't feel like writing, because that's what the brain does. It wants to procrastinate. It doesn't want to do anything that's painful or difficult.
Yeah, it depends on the day. Yesterday, I had a day where I did not feel like writing, and everything that I put down on paper felt like garbage, but I made myself write anyway because I'm up against a deadline. If I'm not up against a deadline and I can afford to, then yes, sometimes I will just say, you know what? It's not happening today. Let's go work on something else or do something else. Sometimes I'll switch and I'll write some comedy if I'm not really feeling what's happening with the mysteries, and that works. So it just depends on my mood.
What happens when you blow a deadline? Is you're working right now with an editor prepping the manuscript for your agent. So if you blow that deadline, or if you've blown a deadline in the past, what's the penalty? Do you just get phone calls and get excoriated? Or is it more, hey, a week later, you get the call, hey, where's that manuscript? Or have you never missed a deadline?
I haven't missed a deadline yet, but The Water Tower was my debut. So I only have a limited frame of reference to work from, but I haven't missed any deadlines. My deadline did get pushed back by my publisher, but that was not because I was running late. It was because there were other things going on that they needed to push it. And then I was working with a publicist, and she needed a little bit more time than we had when I hired her. So deadlines, I think that they're kind of fluid. I don't want to say they're fluid in the publishing industry, but I think that my publisher in particular is very kind about working with you if you're running behind. I don't know if it's that way everywhere.
Well, and it would seem that any time that's lost on, if you were to turn the manuscript in 2 or 3 weeks late, that time could probably get made up somewhere else in the process if they just put it on, warp speed, some aspect of it on warp speed, whether it's the copy editing or the proofreading or what have you, or just move up the printing date. I don't know, but I'm just saying that it would seem that there's some flexibility there. Now, is your husband still an actor?
He is not. He's thinking about getting back into some stage work now that we're back in Cleveland, but he's been working behind the scenes for the last 12 years. He works for a production company that does set design and sound design, and they built the voice chairs for the show The Voice. He's working on something for a train museum in Australia right now. So he's been behind the scenes for a long time, but he's incredibly talented, and I hope that he gets back on stage at some point because he's fantastic.
Now, is he your trusted reader? Is he your first read when you've written a chapter or the manuscript? And is he somebody who you look to vet it? And is he good at it?
No, he's not, but only because he's not a big mystery and thriller reader. He prefers, I think he prefers fantasy. So as I'm writing, I don't have anyone read my work. I wait until it's finished, and then I have beta readers read it because I want to get an unbiased opinion. And I think that my husband is very nice, and he wouldn't tell me if it was terrible anyway. So,
right. Yeah. So, have you, in getting your first book published, did you spend time at conferences, writers' conferences? Are you part of a writers group, or did you just, head out to, or head into the, living room or the patio and just sit down and write it?
I'm not part of a writing group, although I think that they're extremely useful, and I would love to find one. I haven't been in place long enough to have found one. I did go to a writing conference in March of this year. I went to Left Coast Crime, and I had a great time. I met other writers. I got to sit on a panel. I met readers, but my book wasn't out yet, so I wasn't able to really sell it. I mean, I brought some bookmarks, but my book wasn't available there. But it was a great time, and I think I'll probably go next year. I think the conferences are a lot of fun, and I think that they're very good for meeting other writers and just kind of sharing in your experience, because you don't get to do that day to day necessarily.
What got you involved in comedy? Your parents got you involved in acting when you were young. Was comedy something that happened early in life, or did you pick that up later on?
I picked it up later on. I took a class in 2019. I decided that I wanted to try stand-up. There are a lot of stand-up comedians in LA, and it looked like fun. So I took a class, and I really liked it. And I started doing it a lot. Over the course of the pandemic, comedy went to Zoom. So my husband built me like a little studio, and I had a mic and a backdrop, and I had, my own little club in my office where I would perform. But Zoom comedy allowed me to meet comedians all over the US. So it was really cool, because I don't think I would have met any of those people, or I wouldn't have met a lot of them if it had not been for the pandemic, which is wild.
What kind of comedy do you do? I mean, would you liken yourself to anybody? Do you do dirty comedy? Do you do a particular style of comedy? Like Jim Gaffigan, it's all about being a father and a parent. He does a lot of that kind of stuff. What's your subject matter?
My subject matter, I think it's observational comedy is what you would call it. It's kind of all over the place, but I don't do a lot of dirty bits. I don't even think I have any.
So you don't use profanity, you don't use sexual situations unless it's just kind of implied or just kind of soft.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'll use profanity just because that's the way that I speak, but I wouldn't classify it as blue necessarily, which is, what they call dirty comedy. There's not a lot of sexual situations. I talk about my family. I make fun of myself a lot because I think that my life, life is ridiculous. And I think that if you can find the humor in it, then it becomes a lot less difficult.
Yes. Yeah. The absurdity of life, for sure. So do you have a comedian who is your favorite, whether living or somebody who has entered immortality, so to speak?
Yeah, I really like Chad Daniels very much. And I like Tom Segura. Kelsey Cook is another great one. She's kind of newer to me, but she's really good. Whitney Cummings, I think that she's absolutely hilarious. I love Jim Gaffigan. Yeah, there's so many good ones out there.
Let me ask you about stepping out on stage. It has to be, if you're a typical human being, highly stressful because you've got these people sitting there and you're expected to make them laugh. And oftentimes I'm sure that you're stepping in front of them with material that has not been all that tested. What's the experience? Describe the experience of walking out there and having to deliver in such a big way. It's very difficult to be funny, especially when people are expecting you to be funny.
Yeah, yes, it is. It's nerve-wracking to be on stage as a comedian because it is different than being on stage as an actor, unless you have some sort of persona that you're putting on. It feels more raw. It feels like you're kind of presenting yourself to a group of people and asking them to like you, which isn't exactly what it is, but it kind of feels that way. I think that the more you do it, as with anything, the more you practice, the more it doesn't bother you. But you're right, it is nerve-wracking to get up on stage and, try to make people laugh when they're expecting that. Especially when, if you've got like a heckling situation happening before you get up on stage. That happened to me recently. And it wasn't something that I'd ever experienced. And I know a lot of comedians who have been doing it for a long time and haven't experienced that. So
you've been heckled. You have been heckled before.
Yes, I have been heckled.
Do you have lines stored up for instance, a comedian? Last thing a comedian wants is the audience to start taking pot shots at them. Do you have any lines? I love live comedy, and I used to live in LA. I've been to the Ice House and the Improv and all that. And it seems that a lot of the comedians come prepared for, the disruptive audience member, and they've got their lines down and they kind of put them in their place real quick.
Yeah, I think that comedians do. First of all, comedians do have lines prepared. And I think that once you get into a situation where you've been heckled, then you go home and you write 30 lines to figure it all out. And it's great to have those ready. I was a little bit unprepared the last time this happened, and the person was extremely intoxicated and ended up being removed in the middle of my set. So we had to pause the show and they escorted her out. But yeah, comedians arm themselves generally with comebacks to try to combat any heckling that might happen. But you never know what someone is going to say to you. I had somebody arguing with me about whether or not Mark Wahlberg was a rapper. And I was like, wow. I don't know how to argue with you about this because you're wrong. So yeah, it's wild. It's a good time.
Well, when I say comedians, have those lines to put the audience member in their place, I've always seen that the line is what is it makes people laugh. They're not just saying, "Hey, why don't you sit down and shut up?" because you're not who they paid to see. I mean, that would be a pretty crude way of handling it. But what I've seen is they come back, put them in their place with a line that actually makes everybody laugh. So it's not really taking them down necessarily a peg, although it has that effect. But they're not just saying, shut up and sit down. It's a line that's got it's freighted with comic quality.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, if you take a comedy class, it kind of fast tracks you with that sort of knowledge because you don't want the audience to turn on you. And if you embarrass someone who's heckling you in a way that is really awful, the audience will probably turn on you instead of turning on them or getting them to sit down and be quiet. So there's a grace to doing that and to keeping the audience on your side. And watching skilled comedians do it is fabulous because you notice that they can do it and then they can just go right back into their act and everybody's quiet and happy.
Yeah.
But I've also seen, clips on TikTok where the comedian loses their mind and starts screaming at the audience member, and that never works.
No.
So, yeah.
Yeah, one of the hallmarks of a really good comedian, from my own observation, is that they're very comfortable on stage. They're very relaxed. They look like they were born to do it, or they've done it so many times that they don't really get jacked up about it. They have tremendous facility on the dais. Do you feel that you have developed that? Is that something that's natural to you, or is that something you have developed, or is this something you're still working on? How would you assess that?
I think that the more prepared you are, the more comfortable on stage you are. I have a certain level of comfort because I have been performing in front of live audiences and plays for years and years. But if I get up on a stage and I'm not prepared enough with my act, then it's kind of a nightmare because you're not present. You're trying to think of what you're going to do next. You can't really have it written down anywhere. In some circumstances you can if you're working out material, but if you're doing a show, you really have to have your transitions down, and it takes a lot of practice. So I think that the more you rehearse, the better off you'll be on stage and the more comfortable you'll be because your material will just kind of like flow out of you as opposed to having to think about what the next thing is and the next thing and the next thing.
So complete this sentence for me. The key to successful stand-up comedy is?
The key to successful stand-up comedy is practice.
Do you write your own jokes? Do you sometimes have people who supply you with material? How does your material come into being?
I write all my own material. I think that you have to get to like a certain level to have other people write for you.
Right.
But I've worked with coaches to help me develop a bit more. So if there's like a concept that I have in my mind that I think like, hey, this seems funny, but I'm not really sure where to go with the joke, I've worked with coaches to help me work that out. So that's very useful, as are writing groups with comedy. There's a lot of comedians are part of writing groups where they'll all get together. You do your act for the group, and then everybody gives you feedback and, tags and whatever ways to improve on the material. And that can be kind of life-changing.
Does your comedy serve your novel writing at all? Do you feel that doing the stand-up comedy has enhanced your writing, or are they really just two completely different things? And do you try to introduce anything comedic into your novels as well?
For me, I think they're kind of siloed. I don't think that they necessarily cross over with each other. My writing in the mysteries and the thrillers is not funny. So if someone's picking up my book, they shouldn't be expecting a lot of laughs, because it's just not. It's a mystery.
Right. It's not a Carl Hiaasen novel. It's a more Amy Young.
Right. But with my comedy, writing mystery and thrillers is kind of a crazy process, because you have all these like weird Google searches on your computer, and my husband jokes about how I'm very clumsy. He's like, you can't fall down the stairs because somebody's going to think that I murdered you. Or he jokes that, I know so many different ways to kill him. And it's just, those things will kind of make their way into my act. But it doesn't necessarily work the other way around. Right.
Now, have you teach the English? Have you been an English instructor as well?
I have not been an English instructor, but I did spend a year with Great Lakes Theater Festival teaching mostly Shakespeare. We did 1-week residencies at schools around the Northeast Ohio area. So I did that for a year, which was extremely hard work. Teachers, I don't know how teachers do it. They're amazing. But that was a really cool experience.
Now, you teach, as I said at the top, at the Lakewood Young Filmmakers Academy. What do you teach, and how do you teach? Are you teaching acting, and whatever you're teaching, how do you go about it?
I was teaching a method acting class. I was teaching it with the founder, whose name is Eric Swinderman, who was the director of a movie called The Enormity of Life. And he has another film. He's a fantastic director. And then an audition workshop. And then we're talking about doing a stand-up comedy class in the fall. But, I have recently returned to the Cleveland area, so I haven't been teaching there for long.
Gotcha. So as you look ahead, Amy, are you thinking with respect to your writing, will you be in the thriller category? Is that where you're going to stay, or did you have some other genres in mind, or just general fiction in mind? What's the outlook? How are you feeling these days about where you're going to head with the writing career?
I think I will probably stay in the thriller and mystery genre. I may attempt a humorous book of essays at some point. I have a few that I've written, but I think that that'll take a lot of time to put together. So I think that I will probably stay in this mystery genre.
So and that is what you enjoy reading as well. Is that the case?
It is. I really enjoy thrillers, psychological thrillers, suspense.
Do you have a particular author or two who you have read his or her entire collection, or that you find inspirational?
I do. I really love Ruth Ware's work, and I've read all but her most recent novel, which I think is called 0 Days. I really like Lisa Jewell, and Amber Garza, Riley Sager. I've read a lot of James Patterson's canon, although he has so many books. It's it's so hard to read all of them. But I've read
coming out with more. Yeah,
constantly.
Yeah,
I love his machine. His Women's Murder Club series, though. I really like that one. Just anything I can get my hands on, really. I go to half-price books every once in a while, and I just comb through it, and I usually end up with a huge armful of books that I have trouble getting to my car.
Let me ask you about the aspiring novelist out there who hasn't come out with their first novel yet. And as you have, what is your piece of writing advice to an aspiring novelist?
My piece of writing advice is to just start writing. It's so easy to come up. I mean, for me, it is so easy to come up with excuses like, oh, I can clean the kitchen and I can do this other thing. But once I sit down and get going, I'm always happy that I did. And my rule for myself, especially on the first draft, is it doesn't have to be good. It just has to be words. So as long as I get something down on paper that I can actually work with, I have accomplished what I need to accomplish. And you can always mold it later. You can always make it into exactly what you want it to be on the second or third or fourth or 10th pass through it. But if you don't get it down onto the paper, then you won't have anywhere to go. So it's just important to start.
That's a great piece of advice, getting the words out. And so many writers say, writing is rewriting. That's where it really happens. Obviously, you need the raw material, though. You have to produce that raw material to work with. And then the rewriting process, the distillation process is where things really start to take shape. It's amazing. It's almost like magic when, I've had the experience so many times where this is never going to work. I'm working on a chapter and it's like, this is not workable. And I kept at it, and it's amazing how things just start to kind of take shape out of the darkness. It just starts to happen. I'm sure you've had that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And, once you start going, things will come to you, even in your subconscious. Sometimes I'll be, 3:00 in the morning, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and something will have solved itself in my brain while I was sleeping. So you just have to have the raw materials to go with, and then anything is possible.
Yeah, I just consider it one of the rules of life that anything you focus on expands. And if you focus on negative things, that's a danger because it will expand on you and it will drive you into, it could drive you even into depression. But when you are focused on a piece of writing or anything in life, once it starts to expand, you are in a different place. Then it starts to come to you. Yes, like you were saying. In your sleep, it might come to you. You could be standing in line at the grocery store and suddenly an idea just out of the blue presents itself. You're not even necessarily thinking about it at the time, but it's constantly incubating, provided, and I think this is the key. You tell me, because I know you do this. You write pretty much every day, so you build momentum. And once you have that momentum, that's when a lot of that magic starts to happen, even in the non-writing hours. Would you agree?
I think so. I think that momentum is extremely important. I find it more difficult to start writing again if I've taken a break, like after you write a first draft, the experts say that it's good to put it aside for as much time as you can, 8 weeks if you can, so that when you come back to it, you have a fresh set of eyes on it. And if I don't write during that time that I'm letting the work rest, it is hard for me to get back into the habit of writing every day. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Momentum is key.
So you're working on your second novel, and do you already have an idea in mind for your third novel?
Yes. So the second novel is not part of the Lakeview mystery series. It's a standalone, and the third book that I write will be the second in the Lakeview mystery series. So Josie will be the protagonist again in that book. I've got a contract for 3 books for that series.
Got it. Gotcha. How did you find your agent? This is what so many aspiring novelists are working on. How do I find an agent? There's so much competition for it these days. How did you find your first one? Was it kind of standard that where you sent in some sample pages with a query letter and you got a reply?
I found my agent during PitMad. I don't know if you remember PitMad. It went on Twitter, and they don't do it anymore, which is a shame, and I'm not sure why. But there were 4 days during the year, like every 3 months, there would be a day where you could go on Twitter, you pitch your book in a tweet, and agents would go on there. Agents who were participating in the program would go on there, and if they liked your tweet, then you could go to their page and send them whatever their requirements were. But it was a way to kind of get noticed by agents without having to individually query every single one. So it was a great way to just kind of like work in a batch. And that is how I found my agent, Cindy, who is amazing. But I think that there's a lot of rejection that goes on in the industry as far as when you're trying to find your first agent. I think that a lot of people get discouraged, and you just have to keep going, because even when one person says no, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily the work. It just means that it's not their cup of tea, but it might be the next person. So it's just, you have to keep powering through if you're getting told no.
Exactly. Well, Amy Young, congratulations on the first novel. Good luck with your second and third. Really appreciate you taking the time to come on the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike.